Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast. Today we are with Alex Joy, and he is the CEO and founder of Ibex Staffing Solutions. Alex, tell us a little about yourself and the company.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So I'm a CEO of Ibex, as you said. I used to be an MSP CEO, and so I did the whole MSP thing for nearly 15 years. Had a lot of fun in that industry. Worked my way up from being a field tech to vice president of operations, and eventually leading the organization and working through the whole PE dynamic and a lot of the stuff that a lot of MSPs are going through as they grow. And I started Ibex in April of last year, and it was founded through the passion I have through identifying talent, working with overseas talent. I had built out a big offshore team as part of my MSP. And obviously, continuing to be able to work within the MSP space. And so our focus is, 100% on the MSP industry. And so that's where we, have our talent positioned. And we thought it was a great opportunity to do something that really combined all the things that we love and all the things that we're good at, which is, identifying talent in hard places.
What led you down this role? Was it you being able to go and outsource your own talent when you were running your own company? And where did you see that this was a problem or a solution to a problem that you could fix for others?
Yeah. So we started looking at offshore right after COVID hit, and everyone was working from home all of a sudden. So, a lot of our customers were in the office, employees, and then as soon as COVID hit, everyone was like, okay, we have to scramble. We have to figure out this whole
Mhm,
remote work thing. And so, most of our clients had the ability to work from home, but not at that scale.
mhm,
So suddenly we were selling cloud infrastructure like crazy. We were selling enhanced cybersecurity solutions to protect those endpoints at home. We were selling tons and tons and tons of laptops and things like that. And so, we said, well, look, if we're all working from home now, let's really lean into this. And so we decided to start looking at offshore. We started building on an offshore team, and I learned a lot about the value of that, especially in an MSP, right? Where
mhm.
labor is really your most expensive cost that you're trying to control. So efficiency is always the first place that people look. How can I be more efficient in terms of how I support my customer to make my agreements more profitable, especially with managed services where your costs tend to be fixed.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other thing they look at is price. Am I charging enough? And there's a million gurus, in the industry that talk about, how to raise your seat price and how to, package things differently. And there's a lot of merit to a lot of it, right? But it's a challenge for the average MSP owner who was originally an engineer or a technician and now has to throw this sales hat on and keep getting better and better at something that isn't necessarily a natural reflex for them. So, going back to staffing, again, if people are your most expensive cost, getting that cost down and getting it down substantially is going to be the best way and the fastest way for you to be able to increase your profitability in MSP. So it's not a new thing. There's certainly other companies that are doing what we do, but I think I've done it really well at a really high level, in my own MSP in the past. And, the special sauce really is in how you screen, right? In terms of how much time and effort and the lens that you put on the talent that you're looking to recruit to place in your customers, and that makes all the difference. And so I think that's really where we saw there was an opportunity.
Hey, for the audience watching, can you take us through how do you find this talent offshore? Like, what is your guys's your screening look like? Your processes look like of being able to find, good prospects, good talent.
Sure. It starts with having boots on the ground. So, this isn't as easy as just saying, I'm going to start going to Filipino job boards, for example, because the talent that we
Mhm,
source is in the Philippines. At least for now, it's exclusively where we source. Having people on the ground that have a network, having recruiters that already have an existing network, that's a huge advantage for us. So, being able to use that network to suss through who is really a quality, genuine person and who is not.
mhm,
Again, like that's worth its weight in gold. On top of that, we go through multiple rounds of interviews on our side where we have our recruiters run through different screening questions. AI has been a huge assist for that. Like, hey, look at this resume. Give
mhm,
me a slate of questions that I should be asking based on what this person says their skill set is, and let's see if they can really answer it, right?
mhm,
That's really valuable. We actually have a proprietary, we call it the bullshit detector. And
mhm,
so as we're going through our interview process, we're actually running all of our interviews through Claude to detect if the terms
mhm,
and the answers that they're giving are traditional LLM answers.
mhm,
And so that helps us really screen. We'll do third-party skills assessments. We use a platform called Test Gorilla, where we'll have people run through like a help desk tier 2 or tier 3 assessment. Those are not perfect because those aren't necessarily built for MSPs. And so sometimes you'll find that they can be an ill fit for the candidate, but they at least help us establish sort of a baseline of what this person's understanding is and what their real, in the mind, right? Not
Yeah.
something that they can look up, but like what do they really have up here in terms of knowledge and recall?
Mhm.
And then, the most important thing other than references, because of course we check those as well, and that's a huge thing, is me putting my eyes on every single one of them. So, I built a 350 plus person organization, 100 plus of those were offshore. So, you know, I don't let any candidate get through our doors and over to our clients until I've met them myself, screened them myself, asked them the questions that I know I would want answered, that the fact that I've identified them as someone that I would hire if it were my MSP. So that's in short, that's kind of what our screening process looks like.
Interesting. Well, now you guys are only target talent in the Philippines.
Mhm,
Why that specifically when there's, say, some people will say there's talent pools in India or in some other parts of the country? What
mhm.
makes the Philippines so special?
There's great talent everywhere. So when I was 16 years old, I ran a team of about 60 people all over the world in all different parts of Europe and South America and Asia, et cetera, all on a volunteer basis. And so I'm very familiar with, great talent in all parts of the world. And I've been a big believer in that ever since those days. But the Philippines, again, having boots on the ground is super important. So wherever you have people that you can trust is immediately, where you're going to want to search for first. But the Philippines is kind of a sweet spot in a multitude of ways. One, English is sort of language 1B for them. So, their ability to articulate clearly in English and communicate very clearly in English is very important. And it's very strong there. Our customers in North America, that's a requirement, for the most part. The accents, even when they're there, they're not as off-putting, I guess I would say, to American ears or North American ears as maybe Indian accents are or other types of accents. The cost basis is right. So by that I mean it's kind of in a sweet spot. You go to Latin America, the cost is going to be 20 to 30% higher. You go to India, the cost might be a little bit lower. But again, then you're kind of running into some of those communication challenges. So, communication being one, cost basis being two, and then three being, okay, how deep is the talent pool? Like, what can I actually find here? And I've yet to find a role that I can't source in the Philippines. And so, a lot of times people will say, well, if you really want the best engineering talent, you got to look at India, right? Or you got to look at, other parts of Asia or things like that. That has not been my experience. I honestly used to think that maybe I would hit a certain wall or hit a shortcoming. I haven't found it yet. So until I either, you know, can't find the talent that I need there, the cost basis starts to balance out in other areas, I just don't see really a need to look elsewhere on the globe, especially when everyone that we recruit, everyone that we place is more than happy to work, overnight hours, to work daytime shifts in North America. And so until those things aren't true anymore, until those things become a problem, we're very satisfied with the Philippines.
Mm, mm. I see. Now, to kind of dive deep more into your customer, what are some like warning signs that they need to maybe go look for offshore talent or they need to come to you guys, right, for your guys' service? What are some of those pain points that you guys see in your clients before they kind of come to you? And how do they find you guys?
Wow. How much time do we have left in this podcast? I could go go on forever for that one. There's a lot of areas that signal that an MSP needs help with more talent. And it doesn't have to just be offshore talent, but the reality is that typically they would have already hired that talent onshore if they could have afforded to. Right. So number one is the CEO is not acting as a salesperson and as a visionary. They're acting as an operator. They're still going down to the very bottom to fix problems. They're still trying to engineer, right? They're just doing way too many things. And that usually happens because there's not enough talent in their organization to help relieve them of that
Mm,
obligation that they feel to kind of dip down, right? And
mm,
again, we could spend probably a whole podcast just talking about that problem because I think that's a huge problem. But the other aspects are price, right? So again, you talk about MSPs that they have a certain offering and they're selling that offering at a certain price. And they can't get any more dollars out of their customer for what they're offering, right? And the reasons could be multiple reasons, right? It could be that they haven't packaged it in a way that allows them to charge more, but most likely it's because they're not doing enough for their customers. Some things in there that their customers don't know that they're doing, or they're simply doing the same thing that frankly everyone else is doing. Hey, here's your ConnectWise or Kaseya stack of managed services solutions and cybersecurity solutions, and there's really nothing else, right? There's nothing else that says, hey, I'm doing more, so therefore I can charge more. So if you had more talent to be able to do more for your customers, where you could say to them, look, let me do, AI enablement for you. Make sure that you're really leveraging AI to its fullest in your organization. Let me work on automation projects for you to automate more that's happening in your organization to make you more productive. Maybe there's compliance related work that they need doing. Maybe there's software development work. Whatever the case may be, right? There's probably other things that you're leaving on the table that now another vendor can come in and take instead of you expanding your wallet share with that same customer. So not having enough wallet share with your customer where you're truly owning everything for them, to me, that's a signal that you need more talent, and offshore talent is probably the talent that you need because that's probably what you can afford in order to expand that. But really the biggest thing that I see for most MSPs that are in need of offshore talent is profitability, right? They're not as profitable as they want to be. They're running single digit EBITDA or maybe low teens EBITDA where, MSPs at this point, if they're doing things the right way, should be 20% plus. You really should be. And I think with what AI is doing for our business, especially agentically, right? And the fact that, ConnectWise and Kaseya, which is, such dominant players, are really leaning into agentic solutions so much. There's so much that can now be automated, right? Combine that with offshore talent, and then of course, your elite onshore talent. I don't see why more MSPs can't be at 25% plus EBITDA from a profitability standpoint if they're doing all of those things to their fullest and truly utilizing them the way that they should.
Very interesting. How would you say when you talk about profitability, about, getting offshore talent is obviously much more cheaper than, hiring here, right, in the States. Now, a lot of MSPs may wonder, well, what about the talent in of itself, right? Is this offshore talent, is it as good as, homegrown here in the States, here locally, not only with just the way they speak or the way that their customer services or languages, their work, right? How do you tell your clients to be able to trust that this guy from the Philippines is just as good as, Henry from Massachusetts?
Mhm. It's hard because there definitely are still a lot of businesses and MSPs specifically that they want to still be able to walk up to their employee and put their hands on them and say, "I know you're real," and just that alone just gives them a comfort, right? Like it just makes them feel warm and fuzzy inside, knowing that this person is real. And I honestly think a lot of that's just boiled down to trust. I don't think that's because that those employees are doing better work. You know what I mean? I think anyone anywhere in the world can do fantastic work, right? It really goes again. It boils down to your screening process. How rigorous are you being in your screening process? Are you really making sure that this person is a trustworthy individual that has references that can back that up, that has a track record, right, of performing, and can really do the things that they say they can do, that really understands the things that they say they know, right? If you go through that whole process, I can't in my mind wrap my head around what the difference is between that person being in Manila or Manchester, right? I can't tell the difference. To me, that doesn't make any difference. And I guess part of my problem in that is that I am, I grew up in working with remote teams, again, like I said, when I was in my teens, I was working with people all around the country. So to me, that's just those barriers were broken before I ever even built them. Like mentally, I just never had barriers for that. That was never an issue for me. I think a lot of people still have mental barriers around that. And so all I can say to those people is you have to give it a shot, right? Like you're never going to prove to yourself that it can work unless you look at it and take a real serious look at it, right? Like actually go through and do the interviews, talk to these people, meet these people. If it takes you 3 stages of an interview in order to be comfortable with it, so be it, right? Whatever it takes for you to feel comfortable, but try it. And then assuming that you like what you see, hire the person and give it a shot. Right. And look, just like with onshore talent, there's always the chance to make a mistake. There's always a chance to think that you thought you knew a person, you thought you vetted them and they didn't work out. That's going to happen no matter where you are. But I will say that, working with agencies, specifically with Ibex, it is easier to go back from that mistake. We're working with independent contractors. There's less paperwork, right, so to speak, to deal with than having to deal with an onshore hiring mistake. So the friction of it is less. So it combine all those things, right? Less friction, lower cost, greater opportunity, right, in this decision. And really all it's asking of you is to just give it a chance, right? Just give it an honest shot to evaluate it and see if it's something that that you can work with.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that what we're talking about right now actually ties into a past conversation we had off camera about how most MSPs, you said, are actually scared to run their own business. Can you know what I mean, tell the audience a little bit what you mean by, you know what I mean, these founders, these CEOs are scared to run their own business and kind of maybe step away from that, operation role of, being like an engineer,
Yep.
right? When they have somebody else that's supposed to do the work and they're supposed to lead the founder, you know what I mean, the vision and building the company up, but they're stuck in their roots because most MSPs are coming from, becoming, from being an engineer in the past.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So every pretty much every MSP was started by a guy that was a technician or an engineer. That's what they're comfortable with. They're comfortable behind a keyboard. They're comfortable working with computers and talking to computers. They're not necessarily comfortable talking to people, right? And they're especially not comfortable in the sales seat. Right. So a lot of times in my experience, I see MSP owners doing everything that they possibly can to avoid having to do the things that their business truly needs them to do. Right. Their business really needs them to do the visionary tasks. Okay. Set out the goals for the organization, the mission for the organization. Where do we want to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Right. Set out ambitious financial goals. They might not even understand truly the financial aspects of their business, right? Because that's something that they've had to learn on the go. They're not a CFO, they didn't go to school to be an accountant, right? So, there's a lot of this stuff that is kind of scary and stressful to them, right? And so, having them having sort of the excuse to say, well, I would love to do these things, but I just can't because I'm so busy. I just keep getting pulled back into this thing and this issue and I have to deal with this customer. They're okay dealing with customers because they know all their customers, right? Their customers are all familiar to them. So like, that's not necessarily the problem, but going out and getting new customers, that's tough. Going out and again, being the voice of their business for their potential customers, right? For their market to say, this is why you should work with us versus all these other guys. That's really hard for them. So, fixing the reasons, or excuse me, fixing the excuses can be a huge benefit to these MSP owners, right? As in, make all of these technical problems go away. Make any of these customer service issues go away. Hire the right talent, put a glut of talent, aka hire more than what you think you need because you can afford to do it at a lower cost basis to really fix all of these problems. So now you don't have that crutch to lean on anymore, right? You can't sit there at your desk one day and be like, well, I really should be working on a new pricing model and I really should be, working with my marketing person on a campaign and, maybe making some cold calls or doing some LinkedIn outreach. I should do all of these things, but I'm not going to because I have this easy crutch to lean on here that's just very comfortable for me. If you just eliminate that, now you don't have anything else to do. Now you have to go after these hard things, right? And so not everyone is going to do it. Some of them might just say, well, I guess I have nothing to do. And they'll just kind of continue to wait there and hope that some magical, savior arrives to them and, flies in the window to help save them from those fearful challenges. But I think a lot of them will seize the opportunity to now do the things that are the really hard things for them that really need to be done. The stuff that the rest of their team is counting on them to do. Because ultimately, as the owner, as the CEO, you're putting your entire organization on your back. Right. And so you're telling everyone like your jobs are safe and you're going to have a career opportunity here because I am putting the organization on my back and I'm saying, follow me, right? Like I'm leading the way. I'm the trailblazer. If you can't do that for your company, you're failing your company.
I 100% agree. I think a lot of that kind of falls into how a lot of people, as humans, sometimes when we have so much going on, there's so much like I want to say stress. With all the tasks that it comes with running MSP, it's so easy to just have that little avoidance, and what that avoidance is that crutch of I need to go do, you know what I mean, this task or this task instead of growing the business, focusing on the vision. Now, what amount of MSPs that you guys talk to, right, are actually problem aware versus solution aware? So how many know that they have a problem, but they don't know the solution compared to some that know they have the problem, they know a solution, they're just not there yet.
I think that there's plenty of MSPs that we talk to that don't know that they have a problem and it becomes aware to them that they have a problem when in our first conversation,
Mhm.
right? Like as soon as I start talking about the common symptoms that we try to address and help people with, they start realizing that they have that problem. And that's a larger percentage than I think anyone would like to be true. then there's definitely MSP owners that know that they have problems and they don't realize that they are the problem, right? Like they understand that there's issues. They don't realize that they are actually a huge part of the problem because they're too stuck in their own ways, or they don't realize it's partially to do with their management style, their leadership style. They say that they are listeners and they want to learn, but they're not a member of any peer groups. And as soon as you start talking, they cut you off and then they start talking for 45 minutes straight, right? Those people are problem aware. They don't understand what the solution is, right? And then fortunately, right, I'd say probably half of our customers are problem aware and solution aware. They very much understand their problems. They very much understand their solutions. They just need help getting there, right? And so they're being proactive about it. They're working with, an EOS consultant to help them get their operations in line, or they're talking to peer groups or working with their peer groups and have serious accountability assigned to those peer groups, which is huge and I think very important. And again, they're having a conversation with us because they probably realize, and they have realized through their, the conversations with their peers, that profitability isn't where it should be, that the talent level isn't where it should be, that they might not have a grasp of their team the way that they should. So just as an example, we talked to an MSP and they have no control over their employees. No one's answering the phone at this MSP, right? You have support calls coming in. They're just going to voicemail over and over and over again. And they refuse to crack the whip, so to speak, and get people doing their jobs, right? Like that's their job. You shouldn't be afraid to ask your employees that you're paying a good salary to do their job, right? But they are. They're afraid of it because it's prevalent in the entire organization. They've lost control of the whole team. So if they start cracking down on one, they're going to potentially lose the whole team, right? And they can't afford to do that because they have customers that they're losing, actually, right? They have attrition that's happening in alarming rates. So, they're really in a tough spot. So, in a situation like that, an example like that, what do, right? Well, you have to get control of your team again. And there's no better way to do that than to start replacing talent. And I hate saying it that way because I'm normally never the type of person that says, hire lower cost labor to replace onshore labor. Honestly, like that's never, ever, ever my recommendation. I never did it at my MSP. I would never recommend people do it. But if you have people that are underperforming and frankly being disrespectful, that's probably the best option. And it doesn't just have to be with offshore. Do it with onshore talent as well, right? Hire new people, replace that bad talent with talent that actually wants to work and do a good job and do what they're hired to do. So you can start to regain control. And as soon as you have that, as soon as you do that, you're going to be able to start addressing all of your other problems, right? But you can't do anything until you regain control of your company. Right now, it's a pirate ship.
Right? Some MSPs might be scared of they don't know how to hire. They don't know how to find, you know what I mean, A players. The A players that they don't really need to be told what to do. They know what to do. They can educate you on what their job actually is, or maybe even teach you something about what their job actually is. Now, you personally screen every prospect at Ibex. Now, how are you able to find those A player talents, and what advice would you give to MSPs that are hiring right now to be able to find those high level talent?
So, getting rid of bad talent and getting rid of bad customers are two of the hardest things that you can do in a service organization, but both are probably the two most important things that you can do to get your organization aligned and moving in the right direction. Okay. So bad customers, bad revenue, right? It's customers that probably aren't overly profitable. They're not hitting your profit watermark that you want to hit. But most importantly, they're just bad people to deal with, right? They're abusive to your team, they're abusive to you, they're unreasonable in their demands. Like you got to get rid of those types of customers so that you can focus on the ones that understand how to work with you within your parameters. And that's the only way you're going to scale successfully. Similarly with bad hires, right? You have bad people on your team that they're doing work, they're doing tickets, they probably have a lot of institutional knowledge about your customers and your organization because they've probably been there a while. Sometimes these people sour over time, right? Rotten fruit doesn't start rotten on the vine, right? It gets ripe and then it starts to rot, right? And so a lot of this talent might be people that have been there a while and maybe they're a little jaded for who knows what reasons, and you start to lose them and then they start to pollute other people around them. And it just creates this negativity kind of vortex, right? Of lack of productivity, lack of positivity, lack of proactivity. And it's just bad. So number one is you have to hire for attitude. Like that's the biggest thing that we hire for, like people that want to work, people that are super excited about growing individually first and foremost. Like, I want to grow my skills. I want to get better. I want to climb the rung. I want to get another role and have a demonstrated track record of doing exactly that, right? Like, you're not going to necessarily trust someone that's telling you that if for the last 10 years they've just been a tier one, in 3 different organizations. You're going to be like, well, where's this climbing of the rung that you were talking about, right? You haven't done it to date. So, they need to show a demonstrated track record in being able to do that, but they have to really have that right attitude. If you hire people with the right attitude, that changes everything. It really does, right? And then it's up to you to maintain that attitude, right? Not break promises to them, not put them in difficult positions or overwork them, right? And take advantage of them. Like, you have to treat them the right way if you want to maintain that type of mentality and personality. The other aspect is, of course, going to be their skill set. Can they really do all the things that you need them to do? Because again, a hire that has stated himself or herself to be blank, and then you bring them in and you realize that they're not what they said they are, right? That's actually going to do more damage than if you have never hired them to begin with, right? Because now you're probably going to have like a 3 to 6 month period of time where you're like, well, maybe they're just figuring things out. Oh, well, they said they knew this, and I've seen a glimmer of hope here, but overall, they're not doing what they said they'd do. That's just going to further add more contamination, to the pool that you have, right? Everyone now that's already on that team is going to be like, I can't believe they hired this guy. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like, what's happening? This place is only getting worse. So again, it all goes back to the screening of making sure that you're hiring people that really are excited about the job, that are enthusiastic about working, that want to make your place a better place to work and a better place to be and do better for your customers. And then making sure that they're not completely full of what, right? When it comes to their talent, they have to be able to execute. Our attitude, regardless, they have to be able to execute. So screening for those things is super important. That's all easier said than done, right? Like, I can say those things and then I can put someone in an interview with someone and they're going to say like, okay, does this person have the right attitude? Or, did I really verify that this person is truly, skilled and truly understands what they're doing? Again, AI is a huge resource for us these days. You can use a lot of that to help you assess interviews both during and after the fact, to really try to assess if a person was being truthful, if they were cheating, to help you in a round 2 interview with that same candidate, maybe ask some other questions that maybe you missed, things like that. I would definitely say that everyone should leverage AI for these things. But aside from that, that's why companies like Ibex exist, right? And that's why we are in business, is because we do this very, very, very well. Right. So if you are struggling with vetting talent and screening talent yourself, and it's just not something that you feel is ever going to be a really well exercised muscle of yours that you can flex, then maybe lean on someone like us to help with that. Right. That's why staffing firms exist.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I 100% agree. You even talked about letting go of bad customers there and kind of related the two of having bad staff and bad customers. Now, when you have bad customers, how do you guys screen saying, we don't want to really work with these people? Is it just culture? Is it strictly just the culture of that company? Because I know that culture can affect, staff. It can turn good staff into mediocre or even bad staff, right? Depending on your culture and your company. How do you guys personally screen your customers and know that, hey, this company that wants to work with us, that wants staff, it's not going to work no matter who we place in there because their culture is just terrible. And even if we give them an A-tier player, that A-tier player is not going to want to work there, or just going to end up not performing because their company culture is just not up to par.
Yeah. So I'll start with when I was CEO of my MSP. We had probably right before I was CEO, actually, when I was VP of Ops and Chief Business Officer, we had probably 60% of our customers that were underpaying for our services. They were on what you would call like legacy pricing deals, right? And so you could look at that at a glance and say, these are all bad. That's all bad revenue. These are all bad customers because we're not profitable. Not true, right? You have to give them all the opportunity to become good customers, right? Especially if it's your fault. Which, again, if you're not charging them enough, that's your fault. That's not their fault, right? If that's the problem, it's your fault. So I went through every single customer that we had over about a 2-year span, and I increased pricing on average over 60% across the board. Some customers were not interested in that, so I had to let some of those customers go. The vast majority were interested in that because they recognized that the level of service that we had been delivering for years was stellar. Right. And it was only getting better. We were only adding value. I didn't come to them and say, hey, we're still doing the same thing we've been doing for you for the last 5 to 10 years, but I'm going to raise your price. No, I said, look, we haven't raised your price in 5 to 10 years. That itself is a problem. And I'm sure you can agree with that. But look at all the other things we're doing for you now. We've expanded our coverage hours. We're doing more services for you. We're offering this, we're offering that, etc. It was an easy case to make. And for a couple of customers, apparently it wasn't. And so again, we let them go, right? That's an easy thing to say, look, okay, fine, we're parting ways. The culture thing though, let's say, price is right, everything else is aligned. It's really just a matter of like, I don't know if I can work with this person because of our dynamic, how we communicate with each other. That's a tough decision. And I will say that you have to be very careful because people move around in organizations, right? You might have a point of contact in a company that you really can't stand and that maybe can't stand you. And it creates a really challenging working dynamic. But guess what? Maybe they move on and now you have a new person that you're working with. Great, problem solved, right? You didn't have to fire the customer. Everything's fixed. The challenge usually lies with if this person is at the top, right? If this is the owner, the CEO, that sort of thing, it's unlikely that person's moving on, right, from their own company. So if you don't have a good relationship with that person, if you don't feel like they understand, your values, your cultural values, how you intend to work with them and how you intend for them to work with you, that might be a situation where you say, look, it's time to put a line in the sand and say, this is something that we just can't cross, right? I think we're just not gonna be able to work together. In this business and at Ibex, I've only a couple of times encountered some owners that I said, look, I just don't think this is really going to work out. And it traditionally has been the owners that don't want to listen to anything, right? They come to you with the problems, you provide them with solutions, and it's like it went in one ear and out the other. And then they keep coming back to you with the same type of problem. And again, it's as if they know the answers already. At least that's what they're telling you. Like, oh yeah, here's all the problems. And I already know all the answers. I already know all the answers to them, but yet nothing's changing and they're not fixing it. So if you already know all the answers, why are you telling me the problems and why aren't you fixing them? Right. And if you can't help yourself and if you can't listen to others who can potentially help you, then I don't see what we're doing here. Like, what's the point of us working together and just wasting all of each other's time if no one's going to learn anything from the other person?
Mm, Now, when you speak to founders and they say that they know all the problems, they know how to do it, which ones are there? Are those the ones that think that they're problem aware, or are these the ones that they're just ignorant? They're completely ignorant. They really don't know much, and you're trying to educate them. Which are the kind of these customers that are more of a headache to, educate and say, no, actually, this is your problem. You really don't know exactly what's going on. Your head is, what I mean, completely in the operations here when it should be, what I mean, in sales or leading the company XYZ. Which kind of those guys are giving you most of a headache?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely the people that don't understand the problem. I think most
Mhm.
of all, right? Shockingly, it's usually a situation where I'm the first person that's identified it. Right, I'm the first person that's said to them, you're spending way too much time working inside your business, putting out fires, and you need to be selling. It's the type of person that tells me, oh, I really need to hire a salesperson, buddy. Look in the mirror. You are the salesperson, right? Unless you're over 20 million in revenue, you're the sales guy. I'm sorry. Like you can hire salespeople. I'm not saying don't hire salespeople, but you are the ultimate sales guy, right? Like that's what a founder's job is. So like if you're doing a million in revenue or 2 million in revenue, you're telling me that you need a sales guy and you have, profitability problems and, you're not bringing in enough new customers and you're putting out fires, this and that. Dude, the problem is you, man. Like it's that you don't know what hat you're supposed to be putting on every morning when you wake up. That's the problem. So that's usually the most frustrating for me because somehow I'm the first one that's identified this and told them. And again, these people usually aren't participating in anything that can shine a light on these problems from like peer groups and things like that. They're the types of guys that attend every conference known to man, right? They're at Kaseya Connect, they're at IT Nation, they're doing all the conferences, but they're not actually learning anything at them. They're going there to socialize, to have drinks, to, get swag, to pick new vendors, but they're not learning anything, right? And they're certainly not comparing themselves appropriately to people. So those are the guys that oftentimes can't get out of their own way.
Now, me and you, like we went a little bit back and forth a couple weeks ago about, founders should be the lead sales rep or the lead sales force all the way up to $20 million in ARR. And I just want you to, because a lot of MSPs, they would say to you, I never did cold outreach. I've never did cold sales. I'm an engineer. I'm really good at IT. I'm not I'm not a sales operator. I'm just not. Could you like defend your stance to someone that is listening right now and saying that, I'm terrible at sales. I'm an engineer. I'm terrible at sales. I can be a founder, but I'm terrible at it.
Sure. Look, if you're truly, truly, truly terrible at it, like, you're walking into a customer's office and you literally trip and your pants fall down, right, as you're heading into the door, right? Like, comically Kramer bad, right? Like, then okay, sure, I'll defer to that particular case. You should probably give up a big chunk of your equity to bring in a partner that is business oriented, that is commercially savvy, and have that person be the sales face of your organization, because there's always going to be a job to the waz, right? And so if that's what you need, then sure, right? But I do think that for the most part, the majority of MSP owners, even the ones that started as engineers, can force themselves to become commercially oriented and to become respectable salespeople. Okay, because honestly, I think the problem is that a lot of these owners look at sales as being something you have to be slick with, right? Like, they think of the car salesman or the attorney with the three-piece suit. They're like, oh, this has to be some really, really smooth, slick back hair, type of guy. And look at me, I'm just not that guy. That's not what sales is, especially when it comes to IT services, right? Like, sales is all about being honest and building trust with your customers, right? And not only that, but knowing your shit. Like, you have to know your shit. I was always very effective in sales, not because, my teeth were white or because I had a clean haircut that day or I dressed appropriately or whatever. It's because I'm actually very technical. I understand every single thing that I'm positioning and selling to my customers. And I'm a relationship person. I like building relationships with people and then living up to that relationship that I've established, right? As in, I'm selling you this and now I'm going to deliver it, right? And I'm going to continue to deliver it. That's what sales is. And so, I guess going back to your original question, right? Like, nobody is ever going to sell your brand and your vision as well as you can as the founder. No one. You could hire anyone. They're never going to be able to articulate and sell that vision as well as you can, because it's your vision. You're the one that dreamed it. You're the one that built it, right? So it might be uncomfortable and you might not think that you're the right person because of some prototype of a salesperson that you have in your mind. But the reality is, as long as you're honest and you know your stuff and you can commit to what it is that you're saying you're delivering, that's sales. And you can do that repeatedly over and over and over and over again. I'm not saying that you have to be the guy cold calling, right? You do have to be the person that's closing that deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree. I think the best sales trait that someone could have is conviction. And where does conviction come from? It comes from your confidence in what you do and the results that you've gotten in the past and the results that you can show, which ultimately these founders have. They do tremendous work. You see it in the client lifetime value. These clients stay on with them for years on end, right? The churn rate is insanely low. So that should be enough conviction for any founder to go out and say, we do such a good job. The ROI is there. Our service matters and it's very important. I should be able to sell my product. So I 100% agree with you. Now, these next two questions that kind of close us off, you can keep the answer very brief. The first one is that if an MSP founder sitting at around a million to 5 million, maybe a little bit more in annual recurring revenue, if they're sitting here saying, they're exhausted, they don't know what to do, they're stuck, what exactly would you tell them? And then the second question here is, if you can go back to you being before you were a CEO or before you started Ibex, what is some things that you would change when it comes to your frameworks, your mind, past thoughts that you had, like belief changes that you've now have that you've changed? What are some things like that?
Okay. I would say for the 1 to 5 million, MSP, I would say surround yourself with talent. Talent, like time, heals all wounds. If you just keep surrounding yourself with talent, you'll be amazed at the ideas that bubble up from that big bowl of soup that you've plopped yourself in the middle of, right? All of these great ideas that now you can use to commercialize, that you can use for your customers. People that will rise up because they'll identify opportunities to say, I want to be the leader of this team. I want to be the next director or vice president. I want to be the next manager. I want to do this. I want to do that. Create, atmosphere of competition and innovation, right? Where people can help grow your business for you, right? That's what it's all about. If it's just going to be you and one other guy, unless both of you are absolutely spectacular, it's going to be really tough to grow that way. When I started Ibex, I started with more people than I needed. I could have started Ibex with probably just myself. Probably could have. just myself. I did not do that. I started with 4 additional founders, and I started with a recruiter and then a marketing person that came shortly after, right? That's a lot more people than one. But I knew that doing that would help us grow faster in the long run. Yes, I'm giving up a lot in the beginning to start it, but I'm making my life so much easier in the process and ultimately creating a much more enjoyable work environment, because who the hell wants to work alone anyway? So that's the first question. And the second question is, just in terms of my own personal lessons, I learned a long time ago that, there's no point in burning bridges and ruining relationships. Always take the high road, always be classy, even when it's hard. Sometimes when it comes to, customers, right? Like, people are in bad moods. People say things that they shouldn't say to you. And sometimes you just have to smile and cash the check and say, tomorrow, hopefully will be better, right? But ultimately just be respectful, and again, never burn the bridges around you, because you'll never know when one of those bridges needs to be used to get out.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, Alex, if the viewers want to see exactly what Ibex is up to, or you yourself, they want to hear more about you, or maybe reach out to learn more about you, right? Where can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to our website at goibex.it. We're actually in the process of redoing that. So in the next couple of weeks, that'll be a brand new website. You can also find us on LinkedIn at Ibex Staffing Solutions. And you can certainly email me at alex@goibex.it.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard it from Alex here. Alex, I enjoyed having you on. I think you had a lot of great insights that a lot of founders needed to hear. If we can all have somebody that's run a multi-million-dollar MSP in our ear, I think that you would be a great candidate for that. So I thank you for joining us on here.
Thank you, DeAngelo. Appreciate it.
Of course. See you guys in the next episode.